to this community, to the ones who keep showing up, who leave their words in the comments, who trust this space with the parts of their story that are still raw and still unresolved. I see you. I genuinely do. And to those arriving here for the first time today, something in this title stopped you. Something in those words landed somewhere specific inside you before you even clicked. Honor that. Stay with it. Because what is coming through in this reading is something I want to handle with both honesty and care. Now let us go in, because something happened this morning, and the person it happened to is not you. There is a figure in front of me, and I want to describe what I am seeing very carefully, because the quality of what this person is experiencing right now is specific in a way that matters for this reading. This figure is not still. That is the first thing. In every direction I look within this image, there is a quality of internal movement that the body cannot contain. Not anger, not the kind of agitation that comes from frustration or impatience, something deeper than that. Something that starts at the center of a person and radiates outward until even the hands, even the breath, even the simple act of standing in a room becomes difficult to manage. He is shaking, not dramatically, not in a way that anyone passing by would necessarily notice, but inside, in the place where a person lives, when they are alone with themselves, something has come undone. Something that had been held together, perhaps through the sheer force of not looking at it directly, has finally and completely come apart. And the thing that came apart is the story he was telling himself about you. Let me describe what I see happening in this image more specifically. There is a moment that keeps replaying in front of me, like a scene that insists on being witnessed. I see this person in an ordinary space, a kitchen perhaps, or a room they move through every morning as part of the unremarkable rhythm of a day beginning. And something ordinary happened. Something small and completely unremarkable triggered a memory or a realization, or both at once, and he stopped mid-movement, mid-thought, as though the wiring between intention and action simply disconnected for a moment, because everything that was running beneath the surface of his daily life suddenly demanded to be felt at full volume. What came up in that moment was you, not a softened, managed, kept at a safe distance version of the thought of you, the full reality of you, the specific, irreplaceable, completely dimensional person that you are. And with that came something he had been successfully avoiding, allowing himself to fully feel the understanding of what he is without you in it. I want to be honest with you about what I am reading in his energy right now, because I think you deserve the full picture and not just the parts that are easy to hear. There are two things happening in him simultaneously, and they are not comfortable together. The first is grief, real grief. The kind that arrives not when something ends, but when a person finally allows themselves to understand that it ended. When the distractions and the rationalizations and the quiet management of awareness that kept the full weight of a loss at a bearable distance suddenly stops working. When the loss lands in its actual size rather than the reduced version that was survivable on a daily basis, he is feeling the actual size of losing you. And it is considerably larger than he had been permitting himself to acknowledge. The second thing happening alongside that grief, woven through it, inseparable from it, is something closer to shock. Because in this moment of finally seeing clearly, in this unguarded, unmanaged, shaking moment of genuine reckoning, he is also seeing you clearly, not the version of you he constructed to make his choices easier, not the simplified version that allowed him to do what he did or not do what he did not do without the full weight of what that cost you pressing down on him. The real you, and the real you is not what he had been telling himself. Let me describe another image because it captures something I cannot quite reach through words alone. I see a mirror, large, unavoidable, the kind that fills a wall in a way that makes it impossible to enter a room without encountering your own reflection. And this person is standing in front of it, not by choice. He did not walk toward it deliberately. He simply found himself there, the way we sometimes find ourselves confronted with truths we have been navigating around, suddenly, without the warning that would have allowed us to prepare a defense. And in this mirror, he is not seeing himself. He is seeing the shape of what he did, the outline of the choices he made and did not make, the specific texture of how he treated something that deserved better treatment. And alongside all of that, he is seeing you not as you were in your most uncertain moments, not as you were when you were trying to make yourself fit into something that was not shaped correctly for you, as you are now. The version of you that exists on the other side of everything you have moved through. The version that has grown into itself more fully in the absence of his recognition. The version that is, in ways he is only now beginning to grasp, genuinely extraordinary. And that combination, the mirror showing him both what he did and who you have become, is what is making him shake. I want to speak directly to something that I feel several of you are sitting with as you listen to this. A very specific kind of complicated feeling, because hearing that someone who hurt you or overlooked you or failed to show up for you in the ways that mattered is now shaking, is now undone, is now standing in front of a mirror with the full weight of their choices pressing down on them. That is not a simple thing to receive. There is something in it that feels like justice, a quiet, painful justice that you did not ask for and did not pursue, but that arrived anyway through the natural unfolding of truth asserting itself over time. And there is something else in it too, something softer and more complicated. Because most of you watching this did not stop caring about this person simply because they failed you. The capacity that allowed you to love them did not simply switch off when they demonstrated that they were not meeting you correctly. And so the image of them shaking, the image of them in genuine pain lands somewhere real in you. Both things are allowed to be true. The justice and the tenderness, the relief of being finally seen, and the ache of knowing what it cost to get here. You do not have to choose between them. Let me tell you something about what this moment means for you specifically, because this reading is not really about him. His shaking, his realization, his grief, and his shock, those are his experience to move through. What this reading is actually about is what this moment reveals about you and where you stand right now. What he is seeing this morning, the thing that is causing the shaking, is the result of something you built while he was not paying attention. You grew quietly, without announcement, without the external validation that would have made the growing feel more certain or more real in the moments when it was happening. You moved through things that tested you, You made choices that honored yourself, even when the easier choice would have been to collapse the standard and accept less than what you knew you deserved. You continued to become more fully yourself, even in a season where the person who should have been witnessing that becoming was looking somewhere else. And now he is looking. Now he sees what was being built in the time he chose not to look. And the distance between what he assumed was there and what is actually there is the source of the shaking. The gap between the diminished version of you he had filed away in his understanding and the full, undeniable reality of who you have become is wide enough to shake the ground beneath him. That gap is your growth made visible. There is a specific image that has been at the edge of this reading since the beginning, and I need to describe it now because I think it carries the most important thing in this entire reading. I see something being held in two hands, carefully, with the particular quality of attention that a person gives to something they have just understood is fragile. Something they picked up carelessly before, perhaps many times, without fully registering what it was or what it contained. And now, having dropped it, having felt the consequence of the carelessness, they are holding it again, but completely differently, with both hands, with full attention, with the quality of presence that was absent before. The question this image is asking, the question it is placing directly in front of you, is not whether he has changed. It is not even whether he deserves another opportunity to hold what he once handled without sufficient care. The question is what you want from this position of genuine power, from this position of someone whose value has been so undeniably demonstrated that the person who failed to see it is now shaking in the truth of what they missed. From this position of someone who has grown beyond the version of themselves that was present when things went wrong. What do you actually want? I am going to pause here and ask you to sit with that question genuinely before we continue. Because Virgo, and I say this knowing how deeply you think and how carefully you analyze, there is a version of processing this that stays entirely in the mind, that weighs and measures and considers and calculates. That produces a very sophisticated, very thorough answer that may or may not have anything to do with what you actually feel. I am not asking for that answer. I am asking for the one that lives beneath the analysis, the one that is present before the thinking starts, the one that you sometimes catch a glimpse of in unguarded moments when you are not yet fully awake in the morning, or when something unexpected cuts through the careful management of your own inner landscape. What does that part of you want? Tell me in the comments if you are willing, not the analyzed version, the real one. Even if it surprises you, even if it contradicts what you have been telling yourself you want, even if it is complicated and does not resolve cleanly, this space holds complicated things. I want to speak now about what comes next, because the energy is not asking you to simply sit in this moment indefinitely. There is a movement available to you, a forward direction, and I want to describe what it looks like from where I am standing with these images, because I think the direction matters as much as the decision. What I see is not a dramatic confrontation, not a reckoning, not a conversation that has been carefully planned and rehearsed for maximum impact. What I see is something quieter than any of that. I see you moving through your life fully, at your full size, in complete ownership of everything you have built and everything you have become, not performing that fullness for an audience and not specifically in response to his shaking or his realization or the mirror he is currently standing in front of, simply living it. And in that living, in that full and undiminished inhabiting of your own life, the answer to the question of what comes next between you and this person becomes clear, not through analysis, through alignment, through the natural process of continuing to move in the direction of your own truth and seeing whether that direction and his direction, the new direction that his realization may be pointing him toward, have the same coordinates. That is how you will know, not by deciding in advance, by continuing to move and seeing what meets you. I want to leave you with something before we close, because I am aware that a reading like this one, a reading about someone else's pain and realization and reckoning, can be received in very different ways depending on where you are in your own processing of what happened between you. Some of you needed to hear that he sees it now, that the invisibility you felt, the sense of being fundamentally misread by someone who should have known better, has been corrected. Not permanently and not by your own campaigning for his recognition, but by the simple, irresistible force of truth eventually making itself visible. You needed to hear that the weight you carried was real and that reality is now finally being acknowledged on the other side. Some of you are further along. The grief is mostly moved through. What his shaking means to you is less about vindication and more about information. Data about where things stand, about what changed, about what, if anything, remains worth considering. And some of you are somewhere in between, still tender, still holding both the hurt and the history together in a way that has not yet resolved into clarity. Wherever you are in that spectrum, this reading meets you there. Because what I most want to leave you with is not a directive about what to do with this information. It is a reminder of what is actually true about you in this moment. You are not someone waiting to be chosen. You are not someone whose worth is being measured by whether his realization translates into action. You are not someone whose story pivots on what he does or does not do with the shaking and the mirror and the grief that have arrived in him this morning. You are someone who grew, who continued to become more fully themselves through a season that did not make that easy, who stands right now in the most grounded, most real, most genuinely powerful version of themselves that has existed so far. His shaking is simply the world catching up to what has always been true about you. It was always true, even before he saw it, even when no one around you was reflecting it back correctly. It was always already completely true, and it will remain true regardless of what he does next. That is the ground you stand on, Virgo, and nothing that happens from here shakes it. If something in this reading landed somewhere real, if it touched the part of you that has been quietly carrying this without quite being able to name it, I want to hear from you. Leave something in the comments, even one word, even just the acknowledgement that this reached you. I read everything. I am grateful for every one of you who shows up here and allows something genuine to happen. I will see you in the next one.